Jake Sullivan had always thrived in the fast-paced world of Chicago real estate. With over a decade of experience under his belt, he had built a reputation as a top agent, confident, charismatic, and relentless in pursuit of the next big deal. He wasn't just good at his job, he lived for it. The thrill of negotiation, the satisfaction of closing a sale, the art of reading people, and knowing exactly how to sway them, it all fueled him. His mornings were sacred, a carefully crafted ritual that set the tone for the day. At precisely 5:30 a.m., his alarm buzzed, and he was on his feet. A quick workout, nothing too strenuous, just enough to wake up his body and mind. By 6:15, he was in the shower, mentally running through the day's schedule. By 6:45, he was dressed in one of his signature tailored suits, a crisp white shirt underneath, cufflinks gleaming under the soft morning light filtering through his apartment window. He believed in looking the part, polished, professional, always in control. By 7:00 a.m., he was seated at his sleek glass dining table, sipping his first coffee of the day black, no sugar, just the way he liked it. He scrolled through emails on his tablet, scanning inquiries, new listings, and market trends. His phone buzzed constantly, a steady stream of texts from clients, colleagues, and potential buyers. He thrived on the chaos, relishing the sense of control it gave him. At 8:00 a.m. sharp, he was out the door. His luxury sedan waited in the private parking garage, gleaming from yesterday's wash. The moment he slid into the driver's seat, he was making calls, confirming appointments, and touching base with his clients. The city streets were already alive with energy, the pulse of Chicago mirroring his own drive. By mid-morning, he had already toured 2 properties, met with a developer, and secured a promising lead on a listing. His confidence was at an all-time high. The day had promised success. The sun was high in the sky, casting a golden glow over the city as he moved from one appointment to the next, his schedule packed with promising leads. Making a quick stop back at the office to pick up a comparable market analysis, Jake barely had time to set his keys down before the door opened. A man stepped inside, his movements smooth and deliberate, carrying himself with an easy confidence. His dress shirt was slightly creased, but otherwise, he looked put together, polished, but not overly concerned with perfection. There was a quiet self-assurance about him, the kind that made people take him seriously without him needing to demand it. Introducing himself as Mark, he explained his situation in a calm, measured tone. His landlord had given him only 5 days to vacate his rental home, a decision that, in his view, was completely unfair. He spoke with clarity, outlining his history as a responsible tenant, mentioning how he had always paid on time and never caused issues. He wasn't panicked or frantic, just frustrated, the way anyone would be in his situation. Jake nodded along, listening attentively. It wasn't the first time a client had come to him with housing troubles, and it wouldn't be the last. Mark seemed like the kind of person who had things under control, who just needed the right connection to sort things out. He wasn't asking for pity or panicking about his options. He simply wanted a solution. After jotting down his landlord's number, Mark handed it over with a polite smile. His gratitude was brief but genuine, and after a firm handshake, he left as smoothly as he had arrived. Jake glanced at the number before setting it aside. Nothing about the interaction stood out, just another part of a busy workday. He continued with his schedule, leaving the office for his next appointment. By 5 p.m., Jake returned to his office to finalize his calendar for the remainder of the week. As he organized his notes, his eyes landed on the slip of paper Mark had left behind. Remembering his promise to help, he decided to call Mark's landlord. A steady, composed voice answered on the other end. After introducing himself, Jake learned that the landlord's name was Richard. Wasting no time, Jake explained that he was working with Mark to secure an apartment and asked whether there was any possibility of extending the 5-day move-out deadline. Richard's response took Jake by surprise. He had actually given Mark 5 months to move, not 5 days. Richard spoke highly of Mark as a tenant, mentioning that he always paid his rent on time, which aligned perfectly with what Mark had told Jake. However, Richard explained that he couldn't grant any more time as he needed the property vacant to prepare it for sale. As their conversation continued, the discussion unexpectedly shifted. Richard, impressed with Jake's professionalism, asked if he'd be available to list the home for him. Jake gladly accepted, realizing that he could assist both Mark and Richard in finding new homes. With an open house already scheduled at the end of the week, Jake slotted Richard in for Friday at 3:00 p.m. right after the open house. The week flew by in a blur of meetings, showings, and new opportunities. By Friday, Jake stuck to his routine, energized and optimistic. Before heading out, he confirmed his appointment with Richard, who had one request: Mark needed to be out during their discussion about selling the property. Jake planned to check in after his open house and added Richard's address to his schedule. The open house was a success, with a steady flow of eager buyers and multiple offers submitted. Feeling accomplished, Jake packed up, loaded his trunk, and set off for Richard's house. Driving toward Richard's house, he mentally rehearsed his pitch, the rhythm of his usual sales talk flowing effortlessly in his mind. No warning, no indication that within minutes, everything would change. While Jake stood at a red light, sirens shattered the quiet morning air. SWAT trucks, police cruisers, and ambulances tore past in a blur of flashing lights. Jake's stomach twisted. Something serious was happening. As the light turned green, he cautiously followed, his grip tightening on the wheel. The emergency vehicles were headed toward Richard's neighborhood. Unease sharpened into dread. He parked around the block to avoid the congestion and continued on foot. The closer he got, the more evident the scale of the crisis became. Onlookers whispered in hushed, panicked tones. Civilian cars crept by, drivers craning their necks for a glimpse of the unfolding chaos. Then he saw it. Richard Street had transformed into a battlefield. Armed officers flooded the area, weapons raised. Neighbors stood on their porches, hands clutched over their mouths. A helicopter hovered above, its blades slicing through the sky with a relentless mechanical hum. Jake's breath hitched. His GPS pinpointed Richard's house, the epicenter of the chaos. His pulse pounded. He tried to push forward, but a firm hand shoved against his chest. "Sir, you need to step back." The officer's voice was sharp, final. Jake barely registered the command before an agonized scream tore through the air. A familiar voice, raw, desperate. Jake's muscles locked. The police presence, the heavy tension, it all centered on Richard's home. His mind raced through possibilities, none of them good. Jake promptly identified himself to the officers, ensuring they knew he had a connection with the house. Then came the revelation. Richard was inside, and he wasn't alone. His tenant, Mark, had taken him hostage. Jake's mind reeled. He had met Mark days earlier, exchanged words, and discussed working together. There had been no warning signs, no indication of what was to come. Negotiations commenced. A trained specialist, with a large blowhorn, voice calm yet firm, tried to reason with Mark. "Tell us what you need, Mark. Let's find a solution. We can talk this out." But Mark's voice, thick with rage, filled the house. "Talk. There's nothing to talk about. He ruined my life. He took everything from me." The words carried out through the shattered window, reverberating across the silent crowd. Tension thickened, coiling around the scene like an invisible force. Officers remained poised, fingers hovering over triggers. The negotiator's voice remained steady, but Mark was slipping further beyond reach. Then, the moment shattered. Mark emerged at the window, dragging Richard into view. Richard trembled, his face streaked with tears. His mouth moved, but no sound came, only the silent, desperate plea in his eyes. Jake froze. The police barked orders, red laser sights illuminating Mark's chest. But Mark wasn't looking at them. His gaze locked onto Jake. The recognition in his eyes was immediate, electric. Silent challenge passed between them, an unspoken understanding of finality. Then the gun fired. Blood splattered against the glass. Richard's body crumpled. Gunfire erupted in response. A barrage of bullets shredded the air, tearing through the house. Mark collapsed, lifeless before he hit the ground. Jake fell to his knees. The horror rooted him in place. The world blurred, sounds dulled, but the image remained Richard's vacant eyes, the smear of crimson, the swift, violent destruction of a life. The officers surged into the house. Neighbors sobbed. The sirens never ceased. Jake remained where he was, motionless, his mind replaying the moment on an endless loop, the moment everything changed. The scene around Jake felt like a nightmare that wouldn't end. Emergency vehicles lit up the area, while paramedics worked quickly, moving bodies. Jake's legs seemed frozen to the ground as he watched the madness unfold, too stunned to move. The acrid smell of smoke and blood hung in the air. A voice broke through his daze. A detective, her expression calm but intense, approached him. Her steady gaze met his, and there was a moment of understanding between them, a silent acknowledgement of the terror he was experiencing. "We need to get to the station, Jake," she said in a quiet, reassuring tone. "You can help us understand what happened." Jake arrived at the police station, disheveled and in shock, his mind still reeling from the chaos he had witnessed. He followed the detective into her office, where he sat down and recounted everything he knew. His encounter with Mark had been brief, just one meeting at his office, and his interactions with Richard had been limited to 2 phone calls. He hadn't known either of them well, but he told the detective everything he could remember. The detective, however, seemed to expect something more. She had assumed Jake knew the victims on a more personal level. Jake, confused, clarified that his connection to them was minimal. He had only met Mark once, and Richard had been nothing more than a distant voice on the phone. That's when the detective dropped the bombshell. According to a family of one of the victims, Mark and Richard had been secretly romantically involved. They had kept their relationship hidden from everyone, even those closest to them. And recently, Richard had been planning to sell the house and leave Mark, an action that was bound to cause deep emotional turmoil. The revelation hit Jake like a punch to the gut. He was stunned, unable to process what he had just heard. None of this made sense to him. He had never sensed anything unusual during his brief encounters with either man. Richard had always seemed professional and distant, while Mark had been little more than a fleeting face at his office. The idea that they had been in a secret relationship, it was completely foreign to Jake. The detective didn't push further. She let Jake absorb the information, knowing it was a lot to take in. The room felt smaller, the weight of the situation pressing in on him. As the detective explained, it became clear that what happened that day wasn't a random act of violence. It was personal, and Jake might be closer to the heart of it than he realized. The pieces of the puzzle were slowly starting to form, but Jake had no idea just how tangled they truly were. Jake felt the walls close in, his routine, his normalcy, his career gone. Because no matter how much he wanted to believe otherwise, deep down, a gnawing realization took hold. His real estate career would forever change, but so would everything else.